Hi, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. I'm not particularly athletic, but I do enjoy long walks and the wilderness. My dad was a Boy Scout when he was a kid, and when I was growing up on Long Island in New York in the 60s, he'd point out lots of local birds and we'd listen together in silence. Which brings us finally to my guest, Eric Powers. I've enjoyed taking guided nature walks with him and invited him on to tell us about his youth, education, and current projects. And now, Eric Powers. Hi, everyone. Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. I'm thrilled to be talking with Ranger Eric. Correct? Is that how
Yep,
you
everyone
like
calls me Ranger Eric. Yep.
and I'm going to let him tell us a little bit about him because there's a lot of stuff, as you can see with his background, a lot of stuff that he'd best tell us about.
It's a crazy background, I know. How did I get here? And
How did you get here, really?
but I got to say, Joy, first, as we get started here, I had to give up coffee, but I drink mushroom coffee now. So I made a special brew of mushroom coffee so I could join you for Email and Coffee.
Do you like that?
I do. Yep. So
I don't want to
like
get you off the topic. I don't want you to mention brands. Maybe offline you'll tell me because I've been wanting to play around with it myself.
Yeah, and a little bit of honey goes a long way with this, so that just really helps out. And actually, I started drinking when I was drinking coffee. I was putting honey in my coffee because I was talking with he's actually a singer on Broadway, and he takes a spoonful of honey every morning to help with his voice. And that just got me thinking, I have to be careful with my voice because I talk to so many, like 10,000 people a year. So I got to worry about my own voice. And I started drinking a teaspoon of teaspoon of honey every day for my voice. And then one day I was out of sweetener and had the honey and I was like, wait a minute, let me just put this in the coffee and drink it. And I loved it. I loved the taste. So I continue the tradition.
My grandmother had all these old fashioned remedies, and honey was one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So was castor oil. So it's good
Right.
and bad and everything
Oh
that you
my
do.
God, castor oil. When's the last time I had a spoonful of that? Good Lord. Childhood memory.
Yeah, she used to put olive oil in her face.
Hmm.
Nothing fancy, Lather up with olive oil.
So yeah, speaking of childhood, I think I was always destined to be a biologist. I was always destined to work with animals. My mom tells me about a story when I was like 2 or something years old that I kept sneaking out of the house, and she had a hard time keeping me in. And she was doing laundry or something and looking out a window, and I had escaped out of the house and gone up this hillside behind the house, and I was picking something up and putting it in my pockets. And so she ran up the hill after me, only to find, in her horror, that I had found a hole in the ground where snakes were coming out of from their out of their hibernation spot, their hibernaculum, and they were warming themselves up in the sun. And I was collecting all these snakes and stuffing them in my pants. And I was going to bring them all home, I guess. And so she was like, "Put those down."
What kind of snakes? Do you remember what kind of snakes they were?
I don't, but in her description, they had to have been garter snakes.
Okay.
Yeah, something non-venomous, but so I just at an early age, I've just been very good with animals, just naturally attracted to working with wildlife and just being outdoors. So, my parents tried to get me video games and stuff like that, and I really had no interest in that as a child. And then they got me a microscope one year, and that really kind of changed my perception of the world, that there was this microscopic world out there that we live with that I couldn't see without this device. And then it turned ordinary things like fishing, for instance. We'd go fishing with my friends, but this time I wouldn't go fishing for fish. I would go fishing for planaria. and I would I would tie a little piece of bologna from my sandwich onto the line and drop that into the shallows and let the planaria crawl onto it, and then I would take those up, bring them home, and look at them under the microscope and other organisms as well. So it's just I was just a different
unusual child.
I was an unusual child. I guess I still am an unusual child, but yeah,
There's
that
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing
it
wrong.
carried on through through high school, and we were really worried that I was going to be bullied horribly in high school because I was such a science nerd, but I think it some easy publicity actually helped me with my popularity in high school. Is that I had actually in high school joined the Greeley board. There they had an environmental board that met about environmental issues for the town, and I joined that as a high school student, and that hit the newspapers like, wow, this young kid is interested in politics and making a better environmental world, here in Greeley. And I feel like I had some impact even as a 16 or 17-year-old. At least give these people a different perspective on how I saw nature, and also it didn't hurt either that I was trying out for the Olympics at the time, and I got written up in the paper a couple of times about that. So going off to try out for the Olympics in
What sport? What was the sport?
California, I was 22 small bore rifle shooting.
Oh, okay.
I did 3 and 4 position, and I was state champion in Colorado and Wyoming for 3 years in a row. And each time you make a state champion, you get an automatic invitation to try out for the Olympics. So for 3 years in a row, I tried out, and I'm really good. I was really good at the state level, but when you put me on the national scale, I was, I didn't make the cut, obviously.
Oh,
well. But
those Montana boys.
Yeah. And then I had to kind of make a decision, like, do we focus more on the shooting aspect and getting on the Olympic team, or do we go to college and start a career? And so obviously yeah.
And what did you study in college?
Wildlife biology. Yeah, just straight up degree, and it's a pretty general degree because I really couldn't focus on any one group. I love bugs as much as I love mammals, as much as I love birds. But being in Colorado, it was very terrestrial focused. So I learned a lot about the Midwest and a lot about the high plains and the mountains and things like that. So my mom was a bit worried that I was going off doing these studies, sometimes for days on end, up in the Rocky Mountains or out on the plains, and so she sent me to a survival school in there in Colorado. It was the whole summer. I think once a week or something like that, or twice a week, for many weeks on end. And it was an amazing course. And I feel like the instructor kind of saw that I was a kid. Everyone else in the class was, from my perspective, much older, but I'm sure they were probably just like 30s, 40s, 50s, And here I was, this eager kid coming in, wanting to learn how to survive. And I feel like he kind of took me under his wing during it. And he wasn't just...
It's important to have a mentor. It really is.
Yeah, he really kind of mentored me. And not just like the rest of the class, he'd be like, this is how you start a fire. This is the mechanics of it, blah, blah, blah. But then he would bring me aside and really like explain it. Like, so starting a fire is like taking care of a child. So it's born and you have to cradle it and you nurture that fire and feed it food. You can't feed a baby adult food, so you feed it baby food, and just really kept explaining things in a way that I really understood. And as it turns out, he taught in the native way. He was a member of some indigenous tribe, and so he was bringing those native teachings to me. And I've been blessed with having many native teachers along the way through my life that. And I really relate well to it and understand that those teachings. So I had this survival stuff under my belt. I got my degree in biology, and at that point, I feel like I kind of had it with Colorado. The Front Range was expanding at an alarming rate. All the prairie dog towns that I used to go catch rattlesnakes and follow around badgers and coyotes and ferruginous hawks. All those were now like subdivisions and highways and mega malls and stuff like that. And it just really kind of hurt my soul to see these places just disappearing. And I just kind of wanted to get out of there. And so I was looking into
paradise and put up a parking lot.
That's right. That's right. And so the Peace Corps ended up giving me a marvelous way out. It was you don't make a lot of money, but you do make money, and you have the ability to go and help out in another country in many different ways. And through the Peace Corps, we have access to writing grants to help bring these projects to fruition. And sometimes these projects just need a little extra boost, to get it over the finish line. And with my background and my experience already at that point, I had quite a bit of experience. They ended up putting me in the equivalent of the head office of the EPA in the Kingdom of Tonga. And for all of you that don't know, Tonga is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the South Pacific specifically. The closest islands are Fiji and Samoa, and beyond that, New Zealand. So just to put you in the realm. And what a culture shock! What a marvelous change of scenery to be in a tropical paradise. With summer all year long. It was just amazing. But it opened my eyes to this world of marine. And, I'm out there swimming with humpback whales and sharks and learning about coral reefs and fishes and mangrove forests and learning all about the tropical birds, the frigate birds and the fairy terns and just so many beautiful and fantastical creatures there. And the Tongan culture is rich and diverse and beautiful. So the way the Peace Corps does it is that we went through, I want to say, 6 weeks of language training and culture training, just all together as a Peace Corps unit with local Tongans as our instructors. And then we were put in a homestay family where we lived with just me and a family, and they were told not to speak English to me. And I was quite shocked at the end of my homestay when my homestay brother spoke to me in English, and I was like, you know English? I was like, I've been struggling this whole time, and you knew English? He was like, yeah, they told us not to speak to you in English so that you'd learn Tongan a little better. So I'll just give you a little example of how different the language is. To say, like, hello, good morning is malo lele ki he pongi pongini.
Oh, it's one of those languages. It sounds like, bonga, bonga, bonga. I think Bugs Bunny makes a lot of fun of it, but it's one of those languages. It's languages are fascinating. It's just language is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But,
what types of food did you eat when you were over there? Like, what?
well, a lot of fish, a lot of pork, everything with coconut milk.
Right.
They would wrap a lot of root vegetables, talo, and something they call manioke. I think that's around in other cultures as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, food was delish. I tried to eat, local all the time. When I was living finally on my own there, because refrigeration was not a thing. We didn't have stable electricity, so you couldn't really keep things around. And so every day I would have to take a swing past the fish market or the grocery store, and pick up fresh veggies and food, and go home and cook it. And leftovers were not a thing, so you had to eat.
You forget that mindset very quickly because we've got refrigerators, so we forget the market mindset. And,
right. But being there in the government office of another country with ties to the United States, I was able to do some tremendous things, I think, that made real significant impact. One, scientifically, was I was going through the files in the office just to see what had been done in the past, and I found several files that were just kind of forgotten about, and one of which was from the Smithsonian Institute out of DC. They proposed to come to fund entirely a trip to the Kingdom of Tonga so they could survey the marine fishes of Tonga. And apparently they had surveyed Samoa and Fiji, and then there's just scientific gap where Tonga is. And then Tonga sits on top of the Marianas Trench, one of the deepest points of our ocean.
Right.
So it's a lot of circumspect about what could be there. Are there species from the deep that are coming up to Tonga, and all kinds of thoughts like that.
Octopus.
Right. And so I asked them about it, and they're like, yeah, it just never went anywhere. And I'm like, well, I'm on it now. So I called them or emailed them at the time, because back in that day, we didn't have cell phones, and the only way to make a phone call off this island was using a satellite phone. And as I recall, it was something like $3 a minute to talk on a satellite phone. So we did a lot of emailing. And so I emailed the Smithsonian. I said, hey, I'm here. Do you want to re-up this proposal, and let's see if we can make it work. I'm here now in the country for another year and a half, so let's make this work. And let me tell you, they pulled together a crew of 6 men, and so fast. They got funding immediately for this, and I booked. They gave me permission to spend money, so I booked a captain with a boat, and set up meals and all that fun stuff, where we're going to harbor in all these different island groups. There's like 3 major island groups that are there. 5 if you're local, you think of them as 5 groups, but whatever. They came, and I said, listen, the only thing I ask is that you write me into the grant, because I want to go scuba diving with the Smithsonian. And we logged about 40 dives
Wow.
going down. And unfortunately, scientific survey does mean killing fish. So we would use a rotenone, which is a root that is dried and ground up into a powder, and put in a Ziploc bag, and then you dive down under the water and you release it, and in a concentrated form, it stops the uptake of oxygen across the gills, and as soon as it dissipates, it's useless. But in those 30 seconds or so, it's suffocating the fish, and the fish come shooting out of the coral heads, and you're just there with a net, just catching things as fast as you can, because you don't want them to die and go to waste. You want them, if you're going to kill something, you want it to be put to its best possible use. And so we did that for 6 weeks, collecting fishes, and And the scientists were just a buzz. They're like, "Oh my God, this is a new species. We've never recorded this before." And and these are the people that would know. They're doing the taxonomy back in some office in DC. So it was just a phenomenal experience. Also, digging through the archives, I found that they had started the process of designating a national park, and then just like that, it stopped. And so I reopened that file and went up and finished some of the surveys. I had to bring some other botanists in and some other birders in, and we completed the survey of the park. I hiked it and proposed a hiking trail with lookouts and features along the way, which then ended up getting approved. So I then busted the trail and we worked on putting in signs, and we got it officially declared a national park. So I feel very proud about that. It's not every day that you get to do something like that. So
A lot of planning, a lot of you're sort of pulling it out of yourself, and you don't know what you've got until you give them the opportunity, especially in things of this nature where there's no instructions.
Right.
You make it up as you go.
And then I kind of wanted to leave an environmental education, I don't want to say legacy, but leave something behind that keeps on teaching. So I decided to write a book called The Environment of Tonga. And I got to delve into each of the biomes that are there, the threats to that ecosystem, and what you can do about it, how to be smarter with your natural resources. And I got a grant actually from Canada to publish that, and I think we made something like 20,000 copies of it to be distributed among high school. It was we decided to aim it at high school because high school is all taught in English, and so this would not only be good practice for the high schoolers.
Their high school. This is their high school.
Their high school is all taught in English. And their thought is that because college is taught in English, let's prepare you for college by getting you proficient with English. So I got the grant, and then the government of Tonga funded us because I wanted to train the other park rangers there, who I worked with every day, but they were happy to just let me go teach classes. And I'm just like, listen, I'm not going to be here forever. You need to learn how to present this material to people of all different ages and backgrounds. So I dragged them along, and we went on a tour of the country where we presented not only the book, but we also took each high school group out on a nature hike in their own neighborhood. And it was really fascinating. I just remember this one time, one of my favorite teaching moments still to this day, in the island of Ewa. We were at the high school. We did our initial indoor talk, and then I took them out for a hike, and I found a tree called a banyan tree. It's a type of fig that grows and encompasses another living tree and kills it, and then it continues to grow and grows over other trees and other trees, and this thing was massive, 1,000-year-old banyan tree. And I was able to take 75 high school kids up into the banyan tree, and they're much better tree climbers than I am. They're like, oh, we got this tree climbing thing. They were in the highest branches that I was terrified of. And that's where I conducted a lesson on ecology. It was just so fun and fascinating, and I think the kids really got a lot out of it. I loved it. And that really kind of inspired me as well for I really like this teaching business, taking people out, showing them what's in their own backyard, and giving them leaving them with an appreciation for how important that is and how they're connected to their nature. People are not separate from nature, but we're actually a part of it. And a lot of people forget that. They go home and they have their hermetically sealed house and AC and heat, and everything is so regulated. But ultimately, you're on this planet and you're breathing this air and you're part of it.
And even the bugs are interesting. So now you come back from Tonga. Where do you go from there? Like, are you teaching? What are you doing? I know
Well,
at some point you come up with this Y2C, this program that eventually becomes the Long
YC2N.
Island CEED.
Yeah, so I came back and I jumped back into running nature centers because when I was a park ranger, through high school and then into college, that was kind of my summer job, was being a park ranger for Colorado State Parks. The After my second year of being a park ranger, it really downloaded that I hated it,
Mm,
and
bummer.
law enforcement was not for me. I'm not good at that. The officers that are good at that are amazing. I don't know how they deal with it so well. But anyways, the I couldn't manage my stress level, all that kind of stuff. So,
Mhm.
anyways, the nature center director at the park had a family kind of crisis emergency, so she just had to quit and go back and help out at home. So the nature center just closed, and the way the state moves is a little slow, and so they didn't know if the how long it was going to take for the nature center to reopen with a new nature center director. And I had a good relationship with my with the boss there, the park manager, and I went to her and I said, "Listen, I got to be honest. I don't like law enforcement. I'm not good at it, and I'm going to end up either getting hurt or killed, or someone else hurt or killed." And I said, would you let me try being nature center director, take a stab at that? And she said, yes. She said, a nature center director is going to be hard to come by, but I can get another park ranger here in a jiffy. So I tried it on and loved it. And I really just had an amazing time, working with the volunteers that were there. I think I started with 7 volunteers. And after about 6 months, I had it up to over 40 volunteers. That nature center was popping. And on weekends, we would set up stations on the trail to educate, the patrons coming to visit the park. So it was just a lot of fun. So when I came back from the Peace Corps, I did another season as nature center director at that state park. And then I had that itch, to like, let's see the world, let's meet different people, let's go different places. So my big scheme here was to work seasonal jobs all over the country. And so my next job ended up being landing me in Alabama, running a nature center down there for a private camp. But they had loads, oodles and oodles of kids coming through there, school groups and stuff like that. So I learned a lot about how a camp runs and how you do those fun camp things, fires and canoe trips and all that fun stuff. Um, and it was funny. They did something called the Sipsey Wilderness program, and you had a map and a topo map and a compass, and you and like 15 or 20 kids, you take them through a real wilderness area, which means by definition no trails.
Mhm.
And so you have to navigate by compass and a map through the Sipsey Wilderness. And nobody else wanted to touch that program with a 10-foot pole. And I was like, Psh, I know how to read a map and how to
I
use
went
a
to
compass.
survival school.
I went to survival school, exactly. So I got this, and everybody was just like, let's do it because he loves it. And I had the best time ever hiking through the Sipsey Wilderness Zone with these kids. We learned so much, found so many cool things, and to me, what's so fascinating is their endemism. There's the United States is like the epicenter of the diversity of salamanders. And down there in Alabama, it was to the point where as you were hiking through, we would stop at one little stream and find some salamanders and notice that they're, kind of like black, purplish black with little gray spots and stuff. And then we'd go to the next stream, which is just a mile or two down the trail or main trail or whatever you want to say. And we'd find salamanders that looked similar, but they had different kinds of white spots. And so is that a totally different species? Or, we could be finding stuff that haven't been identified by science yet. It was just so fascinating and beautiful to be in there. And so, yeah, I really got a nice feel for Alabama and the nature down there, the karst topography and caves and canyons and things that you wouldn't really, I never associated with Alabama before.
Right. Well, from Alabama you went to, where did you
from
go
Alabama. So now I was applying for other seasonal jobs, and I applied to a job in New York, here upstate, I think. And they basically said, we're not going to hire you. You have too much experience. And, this is like a low-level job. You're above that level. I think you'd be bored with the job. But I have a friend on Long Island who's hiring for another nature center position. Would you be interested if would it be okay if I gave your resume over to them? And I'd be like, sure, no problem, And it turns out that it was a full-time permanent job, and I nailed the interview. They hired me on the spot, and I started running a nature center here on Long Island. It was for the Western Suffolk Boces in Caleb Smith State Park.
Oh.
So I ran that for at least a decade, maybe a little bit more, and after a while, I could see the business was slowly dwindling away from leading field trips, and we started shedding staff, shedding employees, and I felt like I could. I think I even plotted at one time on a graph that my own dismissal date, and I started thinking about what's next, and I had this idea that schools are not coming on field trips. So why don't we come to them? And so I set up a business plan where I'm a mobile nature center, and you can't come to me. I can only come to you or meet you in a third location. And that's the birth of Your Connection to Nature, YC2N, or it was a mobile nature company. And at the time I had two big dogs as well that I trained and trained very well. They were very smart dogs, and they passed their therapy dog training or licensing or whatever it's called, testing. So then, so I had these two official therapy dogs with their little vests on and everything, and I could. They didn't need leashes; they just knew to heel. And so it left me to wheel my cart full of other animals into schools, and these two big 100-pound dogs come marching into your school. It must have been a real sight to see.
But kids love that stuff. They eat it up like candy. I mean, I would.
Yeah.
You would have changed my life totally had you been there. Because that's the type of kid I was. I was a little geeky. So you've got this program, and I know eventually it's going to end up something else. So how long are you working the program, and how did you get introduced to the Center for Education? And you'll tell us more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I ran that for 12 years, I want to say. And I also branched out into doing a lot of different things. I was doing consulting for places. I had a lot of other like state parks hiring me to come in and do programs for them. A lot of libraries got into me. I got tied in with the Queens library system, which must have, God, I don't know, 50 or 60 libraries in Queens. It's a massive network in Queens there. I even started leading eco tours. So I would take, 10, 20 people to other countries and go explore. And this was all born because I would make enough money and then I would just go on a trip. I would just take off and go somewhere. And then I would tell people about it later, and they're like, "Dude, why didn't you tell me about this? I would have paid money to go do what you just did." And it just got me thinking. I'm like, "Yeah, all right. So if I plan a trip for a group and take my fee and divide it up between how many people are on the trip, and so I go for free, but I'm leading the trip. Then I get to travel for free. So that was like amazing for me. And we did some amazing stuff. I mean, at one point, I just remember I'm with a group. We have a Maasai guide who's leading us through the Serengeti on foot. And we're just out there with giraffes and zebras and lions and everything. And a Maasai warrior who's holding like a spear. And I'm like, all right, you got a stick. And you're like, who are we? We're just out here walking in the Serengeti.
Who does this? That's kind of cool stuff.
Yeah. So I really tried to take it all to the next level. And, and a lot of my, how I do things, especially for eco tours, is completely tainted now because of the Peace Corps. After spending 2 years in a culture, I remember this one time I was talking to somebody who just came back from Fiji, and I also toured through Fiji while I was there. I took vacation time when I was in the Peace Corps and traveled around to the other islands. And I was like, "Oh, I've been to Fiji too. Tell me about your experience." "Oh, it was great. We tried the local food, and we did some cultural stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, so tell me more. Tell me about the food." "Well, we're in the hotel and they had like a spread and they said that this was all like cultural food." And I was like, all right, that's not really what I was thinking of as a cultural experience, being in a buffet line. And I was like, all right, tell me about the cultural other things that you did. Yeah. So they had some dancers come in one night at the hotel and they did some traditional dances. And I was just like, so you didn't learn anything about the Fijian culture, and other than you had good food, good wine, and some entertainment.
Luau, and you think you had culture.
It's just so it just got me thinking. I'm like, and they had a great time. I'm not saying they had a bad time. They had a wonderful time, but I feel like they missed the point. They missed a valuable opportunity to learn about another culture in a deep and meaningful way. And so in my eco tours, I was always hiring locals. We're going to have a local experience. We're going to cook with them. We're going to eat in their kitchen. We're going to, or eat in their dining room, whatever. However they do it, we're going to do it, and we're going to experience it that way. And a lot of times that was really good, and a few times it was really tough for some of the participants. But I'm like, listen, you live a very privileged life in the United States. You have hot water. You have running water. Most people around the world don't have that. Right. They don't have running water. You go get a bucket and you purify that water, and then you can drink it. So
everything, everything for them all is all that planet. Things just don't happen for them.
That's right. All that's taken for granted. So, so it's good. I think it's a good experience for people to do it. And plus, I always planned the eco tours where you start off in the roughest, most distant location, and as the trip goes on, the accommodations get more westernized and such. And we're usually the last night we're back in a capital city and a nice hotel. Everyone can take their 1 hour hot shower and eat at the buffet line and whatever.
Right.
But so I love doing that. But after 12 years, it was exhausting running a business by yourself here in the state of New York. The state of New York doesn't necessarily make it easy for small business owners. So They want you to make a lot of money, and they want you to pay the state a lot of money. And as a small business, and I kept it kind of small and affordable for schools and whatnot, I didn't make the kind of money that they wanted, and I was just really struggling with this whole concept. And plus, mind you, I'm taking care of a small zoo of animals by myself, and I can't really have volunteers come over into my apartment and taking care of animals. And I was thinking back to my nature center days, and I'm like, I really miss the community that's involved around a nature center, and I want that feeling again. And so I started looking around for a building, and I was looking anywhere from Northport to Riverhead, and I scanned through oodles of sites, abandoned buildings and whatnot. And finally, someone tipped me off to this building here in the hamlet of Brookhaven. It's an old mansion that was about to be torn down only because nobody knew what to do with it. And it was laid abandoned for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that. And there was a homeless person living in it, and 7 raccoons or 9 raccoons or something like that. So when I saw it and toured through it, I was like, "This is it. It's sitting here on 10 acres of property. Across the street, across South Country Road, is 65 acres. So 75 acres is a lot of land to run a nature center on." And so I immediately created this vision of what this place could be. And then when I'm trying to cinch the deal, by the way, I had to find somebody else because I had the vision of what this place should be, but not the business savvy to get it approved, get our RFP approved by the town. And so I brought in a dear friend of mine, Rebecca Mullers, who is just sharp as a whip, and helped me put that proposal together. And she and I became the co-founders of this new nonprofit. So the town wouldn't entertain the idea of entering a license agreement with another business. So they said, we only want a nonprofit. And so it didn't take me 2 seconds to figure out that I'm going
my dog's fighting right now. Tasha. Now comes the time to meet Tasha.
Oh, good.
No, actually, this is Lucy. Lucy, go get Tasha. Tasha, come here.
I can't see either of them. There you are.
Oh, Tasha. Up.
Oh, you have a husky?
Oh, gosh. Oh, really? Up, Tasha. Yes, here she is. Oh, she's only 8 months old.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, come on, up. Don't forget to rip my clothes off. Oh, goodbye. See you later. Now you know what it feels like to get... She likes to torture my other dogs.
Oh.
So let's continue.
Oh, she's a cutie.
I sort of got her attention, so maybe she'll leave the other one. Will you just relax? Relax yourself. Please. I know, sweetie. I know. All right? You be a good girl. All right, so you got Rebecca, and the town wouldn't allow you to.
Yes. So I folded your connection to nature and opened up a nonprofit called CEED, the Center for Environmental Education and Discovery. And what I did was I channeled all of that business from my company into CEED, into the Nature Center. So all of my clients, all they saw was a name change. It's all the same programs, all the same field trips, all that stuff. But my board couldn't wrap their brains really around how eco-tours are going to fit into our business plan. So that got dumped. But it's okay because I have my hands full trying to create a nature center, and I'm in charge. I'm the program director and the site director. So I'm in charge of all 75 acres and the building, the 140-year-old building, and in charge of creating, booking, and teaching all of the school programs. So that's several job descriptions on my plate. And I love that CEED is growing, and every time we hire somebody, it's nicely taking a chunk of work off of my desk and putting it on someone else's. So I love watching us grow, and it's and the community that is joining us here. So it's just it's yet another amazing adventure.
Another one. So I know that you've got some special projects. I mean, you mentioned something to me about quails. So tell us a little bit about the Quail project.
Yeah. So this started like 20 years ago when I started working in Smithtown. I was noticing that part of my job was that every day another school group would come, and I would take them one class at a time on a hike on a trail in the forest. And when you come back, you do the responsible thing as a leader, and you check everybody for ticks. And there were none, or rare to find one, but still you check. And then one year I noticed that every time I would take a class around and check, I would find 1 or 2 ticks per class. And I was like, okay, whatever. The following year, I would find 4 or 5 ticks per class. The following year, 10 or 12, or maybe even 20. And it got to a point where some of the classes were canceling because the tick population was so rampant there. And I was like, listen, here I am. I'm a wildlife biologist trained to observe changes in nature over time, and I'm not seeing anything. So I decided to do what any good scientist should do, and I set up a BioBlitz. And a BioBlitz is a 24-hour period of time where you get a whole bunch of scientists to come in and identify everything they can in that 24 hours. And I was able to compile a list of species that we found. And I went back to the state parks and I said, hey, listen, when Caleb Smith was first designated in 1969, didn't you have to do something like a BioBlitz and create a species list? And they said yes. So I got a copy of that, and we got to compare it. And we were missing a lot of species from 1969. And I was like, I bet that one of these species that we're missing is the thing that's out there supposed to be eating bugs, including ticks. And so going through the list, it turned out to be the Bobwhite quail. It could be the only logical species. And I was like, Bobwhite quail? I've never even seen a Bobwhite quail on Long Island. And I started asking around, and grandparents would say, like, oh my God, Bobwhites, we used to have them in our backyard. They were a species in everybody's neighborhood. And then you would talk to like parents, and they would be like, don't even know what a Bobwhite quail is. Or, I remember my grandfather taking me out and telling me, listen to that sound. That's a Bobwhite quail. And nowadays kids are growing up never even seeing or encountering a Bobwhite quail. So in easily 2 generations, we've lost most all of our Bobwhite quail, and it's had the consequence of letting our tick population go unchecked. So
what do you do?
What do you do? And so meanwhile, I'm interacting with all of these science teachers and environmentalists, and these science teachers kept coming to me saying, listen, we do a life cycle study, and every year we incubate chicken or duck eggs, and after they hatch, can you take them at the nature center? And I said, no, I don't have a chicken coop. Ducks, none of these are native, so no. And then it dawned on me one day, I was just like, wait a minute, why don't you buy Bobwhite quail eggs and incubate those? Same exact thing you're doing, but when they hatch, then I can take those, raise them up to adulthood, and kick them out the door back into their environment. And I saw that this was having good work. Now I didn't have the resources to do a scientific study once I released them, but I would hear anecdotal information from the park staff that are out there every day, and they would say like, oh my God, there's ticks all over the place, but just after you release those quail, I haven't seen a single tick on me since. And you hear stuff like that and you're like, wow, that seems to be pretty convincing that it's working. But scientifically, can I prove it? No. Maybe it's the fact, and another scientist pointed this out, maybe it's the fact that the quail are susceptible to being bitten by ticks, and all the ticks are collecting on the birds and sucking their blood, and that's why you're not finding any ticks. So I'm like, you're right. That's good criticism.
And that could also be why the Bobwhites suddenly disappeared.
Right. So,
eaten by and poisoned by ticks.
Yeah. But so this has just been a passion project of mine. I don't want to see this bird species go, blink out of existence here on Long Island. And they are fulfilling a ecological role here when we release them. They are eating ticks as well as other bugs, as well as seeds of weeds and things like that. So they're supposed to be part of this ecosystem. And then if you take this further, like why are we losing our bobwhite quail? It's largely, it's a lot of habitat loss. We don't have a lot of fields left anymore. It's the fact that there's a road every, 2 seconds when you're driving. There's very little expansive habitat left. And lastly, it's in people that let their cats out. And those cats go outside and they kill birds that live on the ground, which are quail. So, we've really got to make, really trying to convince people to make a paradigm shift where we really need to, we don't let our horses roam the neighborhood anymore, or our cattle. We can't even let our dogs roam the neighborhood. They have to stay on our property. And we really need to, realize that we need to do the same thing for our cats. They need to stay on your private property and not roam the neighborhood. And there's lots of things that you can do to keep your cats there. Me, for one, I've almost always had cats my whole life, and I just never once thought to open the door and let them outside. They've just always been indoor cats. It's a healthier situation. I don't have to put poison on them for tick control or flea control. They just live happier, healthier lives indoors. And but there's other things you can put in a catio, is what they call it. It's a patio for your cats. There's these tent setups that you can put out in your yard where the cats can go outside, but they're limited to the path of the tent. There's even these floppy things that you can put on the tops of your fences. So when the cat runs up the fence to grab on to get over, it just flops down and drops the cat back in your yard. So there's lots of easy things. It's not that difficult, and it would make a tremendous positive impact on the environment.
I know that you do Owl Prowls, and I know you've done things at Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt, and lots of different things. What are some of some interesting things that are on Long Island that perhaps people don't know about? Like perhaps,
oh my God, there's so much. Like right now is the I want to say, Hawk Watch for one, down at Robert Moses, is it? They have a platform there right now. Is migration season, so the Hawk Watch is going on. On the North Shore, there's a night hawk watch going on up at Stony Brook, right up by where the dam just collapsed. They go out and these birders go out and stand on this bridge. John Turner being the ringleader there, who's a renowned naturalist here on Long Island. But anyways, they do what's called a nighthawk watch. And so right now is nighthawk, like the whippoorwills, the porwills, all those things are migrating right now as well. The monarch butterflies congregate this time of year down on the Barrier Islands. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen a pine tree absolutely festooned in orange butterflies, but it's a sight to behold, nonetheless. And that's happening right now.
Those are
But
are
other
those monarchs or those
Those are
monarchs?
monarch butterflies. Yeah, they just pick a single tree and they all land on it, and it turns this dark green, lovely pine tree into an orange and black, magical,
Orange and
tree.
black Christmas tree.
Oh, it's just something. You just takes your breath away when you see it. It's like you just come around the corner of some trail and it's just there, and you're like, oh. It's like finding the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow or something. But other places that people don't know about on Long Island, we have sand dunes. We have what's called the walking sand dunes, and that's on your way out to Montauk. That's a magical place to walk through. It really feels like you're on Mars or Arizona or something like that. And also the dwarf pine barrens are just a real special thing. Now it's the fall. Fire season is supposed to be ending about now. And now is when the buck moths will emerge out of they'll come out of their cocoons and fly around, these beautiful black and white and orange moths that are flying out around, and they only fly this time of year. So it's and then
I
in the
always find
spring,
that fascinating. Butterflies fascinate me.
yeah,
Any
yeah,
those little cocoon from the worms. I thought over the years I have a garden, so I grow dill, and the swallowtail love dill. So I thought they were monarchs, but their monarchs look like swallowtail caterpillars, but they're not. And I was taking the swallowtails off of my dill. I would take the dill that I wanted them to have, and I put them in a little farm and raise them. It's not as easy. Last year I had a lot of cocoons that ended up swallowtails, but this year I only have one. A lot of them are just like, I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong this year? I don't know.
yeah. It doesn't seem to be a good year for them. I too have
Oh,
seen a
okay.
huge decrease in the number of caterpillars that I've been seeing.
Oh, that's not good.
It's not good.
No.
Another fun phenomenon. I mean, you can go whale watching from several points, from 2 points on Long Island and one in what is it, Brooklyn? So that's something that most people have never done before. You should really avail yourselves of that. And then the other phenomenon that I is near and dear to my heart is because of our topography, how we were built by the leftover debris from glaciers. It's left us with a certain type of soil and topography, and in an amazing collection of fresh water under our feet, in between, in the interstitial spaces of the sand and rocks, and a couple of clay layers, is that fresh water accumulates in us, and we have billions of gallons of fresh water under our feet, and it slightly fluxes, the depth of it fluxes between summer and winter, and in the winter it rises, it fills up basically, and in a lot of low-lying areas you'll get a vernal pond. And those vernal ponds are so hugely important for our amphibian friends because fish cannot live in a vernal pond because by definition it dries up for half of the year. But that means if there's no fish in there to eat your eggs or your tadpoles, then it's a brilliant place to raise your kids. So frogs and salamanders basically flock in February to these vernal ponds, which are now full and often covered in ice. And they go in there in those frigid temperatures because their bodies are adapted to handling lower temperatures. And that's when they breed, is in those early winter or late winter months or early spring months, however you want to think of it, and start off their life cycles, and then they skedaddle back out into the forest and leave their kids to grow up and disperse. So just as the ponds are shrinking and losing their water and evaporating out, these things have sprouted legs and are starting to disperse. It's a real phenomenon here on Long Island that most people don't even realize exists.
It's probably a little different from the South Shore than the North Shore. So South Shore is, it's, for people that don't know Long Island, South Shore is totally different than the North Shore. The North Shore is rocky and the South Shore is sandy. Totally different.
Right.
Totally different.
Two different glacial advances, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So one of the things that, there's a bunch of invasive species. One of them being the parrots.
The which one?
The parrots.
Oh, the parrots, yes.
The green parrots that are just exploding. And the other is interesting. I joined a gardening group a little while ago, and I haven't gone to it too much, but there was a young girl there, a few actually, that were involved in native species. And what they were trying to get everybody to do is, instead of going out to Home Depot and all of the local stores to buy lots of beautiful things, to buy local natural species to repopulate the island, and a lot of those things would support the butterflies and the bees, things that we consider weeds.
Right.
Unfortunately, we just don't like, oh, I want a rose bush. Okay,
yeah.
well, there you go. Rose bushes are not native to Long Island. It's not that they're, you wouldn't find them. They're not native to Long Island.
But no, there's a fabulous effort here on Long Island called Rewild Long Island, and it's these very passionate people about, you don't need a huge green lawn. Pick however much space you want for your green lawn, and the rest of it replant natives to support our native wildlife, our native bees, our native butterflies, our bobwhite quail. Are desperately needing some native plants right now. All these things, and you still keep your green lawn, but give some of it back to nature and plant plant natives, and that's the Rewild effort that I completely support here on Long Island.
There's also, ever since Sandy, I've noticed some birds that were, I'm on the South Shore, some birds that I would see out in the water beginning, to slide a little bit into land. And I was sitting in my backyard, and I'm just sitting there, and I noticed, oh, that bird is pretty large. And then I noticed it was, I don't know, a hawk, I don't know what it was, but it swooped down, picked up another bird, and swooped up, and like, bam, that it just was over in a half a second. And I thought, what was that? And I'm glad I don't have little dogs.
Right.
I don't know what it was. I've seen it a few times over the past 5 years, and they're very quick. So you don't, it's definitely not an eagle. I'd like to say it's not, I don't know if it's a peregrine falcon. I don't know what it is.
Sure. Could be a peregrine falcon. It could be I guess maybe even a red-tailed hawk.
Red-tailed hawk. One of those, because, the thing that gives it away is its wingspan. And I do see things circling every once in a while. As I said, I've seen them once, or, I've seen them over the past 5 years. I'll just be walking the dogs, and I'll notice all the birds around, and I'll look up in the sky, and I'll say, that's not a seagull. It's not a seagull. I'm sorry, it's not a seagull.
Right.
And, it will be circling, and it'll come closer, and then it'll go away, and I don't know what it is. I want to run inside and get a pair of glasses and look up at it. It's just different patterns. It's just different, the way they glide. I don't know. It's fairly amazing. I would say that, yeah, I'm a geek. And I would, a lot of people talk too much. It's great to just go outside and observe. You'd be amazed.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're going to be starting a new club, a birding club here at CEED, And it's just that, just getting people outside to observe. And when you're looking at birds, you're not just looking at birds, you're looking at plants, and you're looking at pollinators, and you're looking at trees, and just all different sorts of things, mammals that you see out there. It's observing nature. And that's what I love about this, even the survival classes and stuff. It's learning about nature and what sort of things you can utilize to survive, to make a shelter, to eat, to prop up whatever, to so it's just, I love how it's, the more you know about nature, the more you realize how your life depends on nature. And it's just reaching that deeper connection is so important, I think.
Into it all, you really do. I mean, we've taken ourselves out of it so far that, hail a cab, go get food at the store, turn the light on, turn the light off. We take so many things for granted. We're connected. Like you take a Bobwhite out of the connection and everybody's got ticks. We're connected, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. And if we lose that connection, I don't know. For me, it is what happiness is. It's a very peaceful, even though nature is not peaceful, it's hardly peaceful. It's just, it is a connection. It answers the questions why, what, when, how. It really does. And it silently answers those questions. You don't really need to know the scientific reason. It's just like, we're all here, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, I appreciate you bringing me on and, hearing my story and the things that I love and dearly in life, and I hope it resonates with your audience.
I certainly hope so too. I know you did a Bobwhite. Are there any other little calls? Because one of the first times I went on a trail walk with you, and I don't remember which one it was. I've done 3 or 4. I can't remember. In any case, when you did the bird calls, I was like, oh, this guy's just too much. I'm like, how do you know? When do you develop bird calls? Like you're sitting around going, let me see if I could do that. And you just do it?
I just do it. Yeah, I just do it. I've always been a noisemaker. That's probably why I was in percussion through middle school and high school. Because I liked all those noise-making things. But also, I found that by making similar noises as the animals around me, they would often come closer, and I could observe them better. So it came out of curiosity of animals. But yeah, I was once even hired to do an art gallery opening in New York City. It was all featuring birds because they heard that I can do so many different bird calls. So they literally hired me to stand in the middle of this place for like 2 hours and just go through my repertoire of bird calls.
I would do that. I would have you at a party to do that. Or like, he's not allowed to talk. He only can answer you in bird calls.
That's pretty wild. But everyone's favorite, I think, is when I do a screech owl call. Okay. And so I'll do it for you. So screech owls kind of sound like this. Like that.
That's pretty cool. Listen, it's owl time. So do we have screech owls on Long Island?
We do. Yeah, we do. It's probably our most common owl.
I'm not going to have any owls out here, but I need to. I definitely need to find out more about the bird observation group. That sounds like a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a weekly thing, a get together. So it's going to also be a lot of camaraderie and like-minded people. Owl Prowl season is just about upon us now. So October, I have a whole series. I think I have 10 or 11 Owl Prowls scheduled all across Long Island in October and November and December, several of which are right here at CEED.
And that's CEEDLI.org.
That's correct.
CEEDLI.org, which
Yep.
I'll put in the notes below. But yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's, it never stops for us. We just go from one amazing season to the next to the next. And,
Well, we're lucky to have you. We are lucky to have you.
oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you too for pulling this together. I love your podcast. Keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. It's the muse on the corner of my shoulder that keeps just saying, do it. And I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Thanks so much, Eric.
Thank you. And we can't wait to see you in person again, and we'll have an actual cup of coffee.
Oh, there you go. Or a cup of mushroom.
Or cup of mushroom. Yeah, exactly. All right, Joy. Thank you so much. Be well.
That's a wrap.
Thanks.